You might have heard about the tragic and infuriating story of a woman shot and killed by a hunter that occurred last week in upstate New York. The shooter, 34-year-old Thomas Jadlowski, believed he saw a deer in a field 200 yards away and shot at the target with a pistol. That single shot, taken after sunset, struck 43-year-old Rosmarie Billquist, killing her. Just awful. Now, regardless of one's opinion on the usefulness or ethics of sport hunting, this case raises so many legal questions. And so to explore some of these topics, I'm very pleased to welcome Diane Balkin, Senior Staff Attorney at Animal Legal Defense Fund. Welcome to the program, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me.
Diane, let's begin by reviewing the facts of this case as we know them so far. Start with this poor victim. Who was she? Where was she? And what was she doing when she was shot?
According to the accounts that I have reviewed, she was a wonderful mother. She volunteered for the church and for hospice. She was simply out walking her two dogs when this horrible event occurred.
And the shooter, Jadlowski, what did the report say about what he said and did?
He indicated that he believed he saw a deer and he fired a shot. When he heard human cries, he went to the victim, found her, apparently tried first aid and called 911, but she died en route to the hospital, which was approximately 30 miles away.
So sad. So what do you believe are the main legal questions and issues this case raises?
There are two main avenues that can be pursued. Number one, and least important, would be his hunting privileges. Was he licensed to hunt? According to the media accounts, the hunting season had barely started. So number one, did he have a valid hunting license? And together with that privilege comes certain responsibilities. Among them are the necessity for the hunter to know the regulations surrounding that privilege. So if you violate the requirements, there are administrative hearings that can be handled with regard to that licensure. A license can be suspended or revoked. It's my understanding that he, in fact, violated New York laws about hunting because there are specific hours set forth for deer hunting, and deer hunting can only take place between the hours of sunrise and sunset. According to the accounts, the shooting occurred about 40 minutes after sunset. And so he's looking at liability that relates to his privilege to hunt. But more importantly, the question is, should there be a criminal sanction for this unlawful and unnecessary taking of a totally innocent victim's life?
Do we know if he had a valid hunting license?
I would say implicit in the article is that he's likely to have one, but it is unclear, and those are really just administrative sanctions. I reviewed the statutes, and there's no real penal aspect to it or criminal punishment unless there was a determination made that he was intoxicated at the time, and the articles don't mention that.
Diane, this is regarded as an accidental shooting. Aren't hunters supposed to identify their targets with absolute certainty before taking their shot?
One would certainly hope that that is one of the criteria. The whole point is to not take the life of certainly a human, let alone an animal for which you're not licensed or during hours it's not permitted or with a weapon that is not sanctioned. And this would be actually a good place for me to address the question you had about, or the statement that this was accidental. Merely because an event is accidental, it doesn't mean that it is not criminal. Every state has various regulations and sanctions for taking a human life, and the class of the crime depends on the mental state of the person that causes the death of the other human. And in New York, it varies, from murder on down to criminally negligent homicide. And criminally negligent homicide and manslaughter include actions that are reckless or criminally negligent. So an event can be, quote-unquote, accidental, but it can be able to be pursued under the criminal code under the theories of recklessness or negligence.
Diane, this morning I read that he was charged with manslaughter and hunting after hours and that he posted bail.
Okay.
What can we expect to happen now?
So manslaughter is prohibited by law in the state of New York. And what is very clear is that, I presume it was a grand jury indictment, opted to indict him for manslaughter rather than criminally negligent homicide. Manslaughter is a more serious crime requiring a greater mental state, the mental state of recklessness. I am presuming that the prosecutor will pursue this charge on through a jury trial or some type of a negotiated plea or guilty plea.
And what penalties go along with involuntary manslaughter?
According to New York law, manslaughter is a Class C nonviolent felony, and the possible penalty facing this individual would be anything from no jail and probation up to an average range of sentence from 1 to 2 years up to 15 years.
The Commissioner of New York's Department of Conservation, Basil Seagos, said, "Today, Mr. Jedlowski is being held accountable for his dangerous and reckless conduct when he shot his neighbor in the dark." Diane, do you think it's appropriate for this commissioner to release that statement at this time?
It all depends on what the regulations are in that locality. A lot of this should be referred to the prosecutor's office once an indictment is returned, because nobody wants to, jeopardize the further proceedings of the case. However, having said that, there are numerous homicide cases throughout the country that are highly publicized that you have not heard about, where they can still impanel a fair and impartial jury.
How would this case be different if the shot was taken during the day?
There wouldn't be a per se violation of the hunting regulations. The fact that he violated the hunting law, and that a person who is theoretically trained in a firearm should understand that the reason that this is prohibited after sunset is precisely to avoid these kinds of unnecessary, untimely, and horrible deaths. You don't fire a gun in the dark.
In general, do you feel that these so-called accidental shootings of innocent people and or their animals, their companion animals, are prosecuted strongly enough?
So much of it depends on the context and the relationship between the shooter and the victim. Where did it happen? What time of day? What are the variables? Was it dark? Was it in the shooter's home or on their property? Was it out in an open field? Is there a pre-existing relationship, etc.? We also all know about shootings of dogs, and those are very, very, very difficult cases to analyze, and unfortunately are either under prosecutor or unable to be prosecuted.
Wow.
Probably the most common area you're going to see an accidental shooting with a human death, and are cases that happen all too frequently when a person who owns a firearm, including a law enforcement officer, leaves a firearm not locked and not in a safe place, and a child gets a hold of it and either kills themselves or kills a sibling. It might be beneficial for your listeners to understand that the definition of manslaughter in New York contemplates proving that the shooter recklessly caused the death of another person. And recklessly has a certain legal definition state by state. And in New York, it basically says that a person acts recklessly when he is aware of and consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk that a result will occur or that a circumstance exists. And that the fact that they disregard this constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of conduct a reasonable person would observe in the same situation. So basically, they are aware of the dangerousness of a situation, choose to disregard it. The average person would not do so, and it's fraught with danger just by definition.
Interesting.
And a very good and easy explanation of a person acting recklessly which also kind of is analogous to this case, is somebody that plays Russian roulette, where you put a bullet in one cylinder of a revolver and you spin the cylinder and you pull the trigger. You know the danger exists. You know a reasonable person would be aware of the danger and avoid any horrible consequences. He knows he's got a pistol. He knows it's loaded. He knows it's a pistol that has enough velocity to kill a deer. We're not talking about a little .22 handgun. We're talking about a pistol that he uses for hunting. He knew it was loaded. He knew he aimed to kill a living creature.
Right.
So you can attribute the proof of recklessness precisely to the conduct he engaged in that evening.
Very good. Thanks for explaining that to us. Any final comments? Sure.
I appreciate the fact that the prosecuting authority took this seriously enough to take it to the grand jury, and the grand jury indicted for manslaughter. This is an appropriate start to resolving this horribly tragic event.
Senior Staff Attorney with Animal Legal Defense Fund, Diane Balkin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori.